The soundtrack of a perfect Saturday morning isn't birds chirping. It's the rhythmic, metallic squeak of swing set chains, a sound that tells you everything is exactly as it should be. From my throne on the back deck, a slightly weathered patio chair I'd earned through years of dedicated barbecuing, I watched my two little agents of chaos, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom, attempt to kick the sky. The steam from my coffee mug, which proudly declared me the world's okayest dad, rose into the crisp September air, a fragrant offering to the gods of suburbia. This wasn't just any swing set. This was the Everest of the backyard, a glorious wooden behemoth I had wrestled into existence over 2 long, sun-scorched weekends. The box it came in was the size of a small car and contained approximately 1 billion pieces of cedar, a galaxy of inscrutable bolts, and a set of instructions clearly translated from a language not yet discovered by humankind. The guy at the hardware store had chuckled when I refused the assembly service. "Good luck, pal," he'd said, a smirk playing on his lips. That smirk fueled me. It filled me with a primal, dad-level determination. I would build this thing, or I would be found weeks later, mummified in packing plastic and clutching a single leftover hex nut. But I did it. I conquered the beast. And now, watching my kids' faces light up as they soared back and forth, I felt a satisfaction so deep and pure it was almost spiritual. This swing set wasn't just a playground. It was a monument to stubbornness, a testament to the fact that, yes, I did know the difference between a lag bolt and a carriage bolt. Thank you very much. Our neighborhood, Maple Creek Estates, was the kind of place that looked like it had been designed by a committee with a worrying obsession for beige. The lawns were a uniform, chemically enhanced green, the mailboxes stood at a precise, military-approved angle, and a palpable sense of order hung in the air. It was less a community and more a collection of people silently judging each other's lawn care. We'd moved here for the good schools and the quiet streets, accepting the Stepford-esque vibe as a necessary evil. I figured as long as we kept our grass at a regulation 2.5 inches and didn't paint our front door a provocative color like off-white, we'd be fine. I was, as it turned out, adorably naive. The mailman, a cheerful guy named Gary who always had a biscuit for our golden retriever, was an unwitting harbinger of doom. He handed me the usual stack of bills, pizza coupons, and a credit card, offer with an interest rate that could only be described as predatory. But underneath it all was a single, crisp envelope. It was beige, not cream, not ivory, not off-white. It was a specific, soul-crushing shade of beige that can only mean one thing: the Homeowners Association. Nothing good ever comes in a beige HOA envelope. It's the color of crushed dreams and passive-aggressive complaints about recycling bins left out for an extra hour. A cold dread, the kind usually reserved for flashing lights in your rearview mirror, settled in my stomach. I slit it open with my thumb, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Inside, a single sheet of heavy bond paper waited. The letterhead was stark. Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association, preserving harmony, protecting value. "Dear Mr. Henderson," it began, the formality already setting my teeth on edge. "It has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee that an unapproved permanent recreational structure has been erected on your property. This structure is in direct violation of HOA Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C, which clearly states that all yard additions must be submitted for pre-approval to maintain the aesthetic standards of our community." I blinked. Unapproved permanent recreational structure? They were talking about my swing set, my beautiful cedar-scented monument to fatherhood. The letter continued, each word a tiny, bureaucratic paper cut. The nature of the violation is listed as aesthetic dissonance. The structure's rustic material and prominent placement disrupt the uniform visual landscape of the neighborhood. Please be advised that you have 14 days from the date of this notice to remove the offending structure. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $50. The letter was signed, in a tight, controlled cursive, by one Brenda McCluskey, HOA president. Brenda. Of course, it was Brenda. A woman who reportedly measured her neighbor's grass with a ruler and once tried to get a family's welcome mat banned because its cheerful font was emotionally jarring. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered, the paper trembling in my hand. I stormed back inside, the perfect Saturday morning now shattered into a million beige-tinted pieces. "Sarah!" I yelled. "You are not going to believe this." Sarah was in the kitchen, calmly making pancakes as if the world wasn't crumbling around us. I waved the letter at her like a declaration of war. She took it, read it over with a raised eyebrow, and then did the one thing I wasn't prepared for. She sighed. "Well, it's annoying, but we can probably just fill out the form for retroactive approval," she said, ever the voice of reason. "Form? Sarah, they called my swing set aesthetically dissonant. It's a swing set, not a meth lab. What's next? A permit for breathing too loudly? We can't just roll over. This is a matter of principle." She looked at me, a familiar, loving exasperation in her eyes. "Jack, please don't go to war with the HOA. Just try talking to her, like a reasonable adult." I squared my shoulders. She was right. I was a reasonable adult. I would handle this with calm, rational discourse. I would go to Brenda McCluskey and appeal to her sense of humanity. It was a solid plan, built on the fundamentally flawed assumption that Brenda McCluskey had one. Brenda lived 3 houses down, in a colonial that was so immaculately maintained it looked like a stock photo. There wasn't a single blade of grass out of place. Her rose bushes were pruned with geometric precision. I half expected to see a little plaque that read, "No fun allowed." I rang the doorbell, clutching the beige letter in my hand like evidence. The door swung open to reveal a woman in her late 50s, dressed in a crisp linen pantsuit on a Saturday morning, with her hair sprayed into a helmet of immovable blonde. "Jack," she said, her voice as devoid of warmth as her perfectly polished front door. "I was wondering when you'd stop by." "Brenda," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I just got your letter. I think there might be a misunderstanding." "I assure you, our bylaws are quite clear," she said, not inviting me in. "There is no misunderstanding." "It's a swing set, Brenda, for my kids. You know, small humans who enjoy gravity-based recreation?" A faint reptilian smile touched her lips. "The bylaws make no distinction for procreational motivation, Jack. The rules apply to everyone equally. It's about maintaining community standards and protecting our property values. But it's painted a nice, pleasant cedar color. It's not like I spray-painted it neon green." She actually took a step back, as if the very idea had physically assaulted her. The approved palette for ancillary structures is clearly outlined in Appendix B of the handbook. It is limited to taupe, gredge, or discrete shadow. Cedar is, I'm afraid, flagrantly conspicuous. Every argument I made was met with a calm, unyielding citation of a different bylaw. It was like arguing with a robot powered by pure pettiness. I could feel my reasonable adult facade cracking, the raw, indignant dad underneath clawing its way to the surface. "So that's it? I have to tear down the swing set I spent 2 weeks building for my kids because its color is too woody?" "You have 14 days, she said, her smile never wavering. "After that, the $50 daily fines begin. Have a lovely weekend." She closed the door with a soft, final click. I stood on her unnaturally perfect porch, defeated. The diplomatic mission had been a catastrophic failure. As I walked home, the gentle squeak of my kid's swing set carried on the breeze, no longer a sound of joy, but a ticking clock. My desire for calm, rational discourse had evaporated, replaced by a simmering, bubbling fury. I wasn't just a reasonable adult anymore. I was a father on the edge, and I was about to get very, very creative. That night, sleep was a distant country I couldn't get a visa for. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brenda McCluskey's smug, condescending smile. I saw the words aesthetic dissonance flashing in neon letters. I tossed and turned, Sarah breathing steadily beside me, oblivious to the storm of suburban rage brewing in my soul. Finally, at 2 a.m, I gave up, crept downstairs, and collapsed onto the couch, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face. I was stewing. I was marinating in a brine of pure spite. I started by angrily Googling most ridiculous HOA rules, which was a surprisingly deep and terrifying rabbit hole. Then, out of sheer pettiness, I started searching for playground equipment, bigger swing sets, slides that looked like roller coasters, elaborate wooden castles that would require a building permit in actual medieval Europe. It was a childish, pointless exercise, but it made me feel slightly better. And then, it happened. A moment of divine, comedic intervention delivered by the holy algorithm. An ad popped up in my feed, wedged between an article about a celebrity's new haircut and a video of a cat playing a tiny piano. It was for a website I'd never heard of, usedamusementsales.com. My first thought was, who buys a used tilt-a-whirl? My second thought was to click on it. The site was a glorious mess of low-resolution photos and breathless, all-caps descriptions. 1980s, Eli Bridge Scrambler, needs TLC, a real moneymaker. Classic Mangles Whip Ride, guaranteed to thrill. It was a graveyard of carnivals past, a digital museum of questionable engineering. I was scrolling, chuckling to myself when I saw it. The photo was grainy, taken at dusk, but the shape was unmistakable. The listing read, vintage 55-foot Ferris wheel, county fair model, reliable, as is. A switch flipped in my brain. A dangerous, beautiful, utterly insane switch. My fingers flew across the screen, pulling up the Maple Creek Estates HOA digital handbook I had downloaded in a fit of rage earlier. I navigated to the dreaded Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C. Unapproved permanent recreational structures are strictly prohibited. The word hung there in the digital ether. Permanent. What, I wondered, was the legal definition of permanent? Something fixed to the ground? Something intended to stay forever? My swing set, with its concrete footings, was undeniably permanent. But a Ferris wheel was different. It was assembled, and more importantly, it was disassembled. My heart started beating faster. I scrolled through the bylaws, a man possessed. And then I found it. Bylaw 19. Temporary event structures. It stated that for private parties, homeowners were permitted to erect temporary structures like tents or bouncy castles for a period not to exceed 30 days. It was a start, but not enough. Then, I hit the jackpot. Bylaw 12. Vehicles and parking. I scrolled down to the definitions. Any conveyance which is licensed and/or designed to be transported on public roads, possessing axles and wheels, shall be considered a vehicle. The world slowed down. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a tectonic plate shifting. A Ferris wheel is transported on trailers. Trailers have wheels and axles. Therefore, a Ferris wheel wasn't a structure at all. It was a temporary, vehicular-based, vertical looping recreational device. It was a loophole so big you could drive a carnival through it. I shot up from the couch. "Sarah, I whispered, even though she was upstairs. "Oh my God." I crept into our bedroom. "Sarah?" I said, shaking her shoulder gently. "Wake up. I've had an idea." She grumbled, rolling over. "Jack, it's 2 in the morning. Did you set the kitchen on fire?" No, it's about the swing set. It's about Brenda." She sat up, suddenly more alert. "What about her?" I took a deep breath. "Okay, don't get mad. Just hear me out. She wants me to take down the swing set because it's a permanent structure, right?" "Right," she said, eyeing me suspiciously. "So I was thinking, what if I replace it with something that isn't permanent?" A look of relief washed over her face. "Oh, thank God. Like one of those inflatable water slides. The kids would love that." I smiled, a slow, manic grin spreading across my face. "Bigger." Her own smile faltered. "Bigger? Like a trampoline?" "Much, much bigger." "Jack," she said, her voice laced with the tone she usually reserved for when Tom tried to use the dog as a horse. "What did you do?" "I found a solution. One that is perfectly 100% in compliance with every single one of Brenda's stupid beige-colored rules." I held up my phone, the grainy picture of the Ferris wheel glowing in the dark room. She stared at it. For a full 10 seconds, there was only silence. Then she started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a delirious, I married a lunatic laugh. "A Ferris wheel," she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "A Ferris wheel." "It's temporary. It's on wheels. It's not a structure. It's a vehicle. It's genius," I said, my voice rising with evangelical fervor. "Where, Jack? Where in our quarter-acre yard will you put a Ferris wheel?" I pointed vaguely towards the window. "Right where the swing set was. It has a much smaller footprint, vertically speaking." She fell back onto her pillows, shaking her head and laughing. "You're insane. We're going to be sued into oblivion. They're going to kick us out of the neighborhood." "No, they won't," I said, my voice now calm and certain, "because I'm following the rules. I'm following them harder than anyone has ever followed them before." She looked at me, at the manic glint in my eye, at the sheer, unadulterated madness of my plan, and then she sighed, a deep, world-weary sigh of resignation. "Fine, but I'm not helping you put it together. Finding someone to transport and assemble a used Ferris wheel in a suburban backyard is not as easy as it sounds." The first 3 construction companies I called hung up on me, presumably to call the police or my nearest psychiatric facility. The 4th guy just kept saying, "Is this a prank call?" Defeated, I returned to the seedy underbelly of the internet where I had found my prize. Tucked away on a forum for amusement park ride operators, I found a post advertising heavy hauling and creative construction. The contact was a man named Dale. The company's slogan was, "If it fits, it ships. If it don't, we'll make it fit." This, I thought, was my guy. I arranged to meet him at a greasy spoon diner halfway between my pristine suburb and whatever industrial wasteland he called home. Scrappy Dale was everything I hoped he would be and more. He was a man in his 60s with a beer belly that strained the buttons of his flannel shirt, a greasy gray ponytail, and hands like catcher's mitts. He looked like he'd been born on the Midway and weaned on fried butter. I slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl was cracked and held together with duct tape. "You're the Ferris wheel fella?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "That's me, Jack." He took a long slurp of his coffee, studying me over the rim of the thick ceramic mug. "So let me get this straight. You want to put a 55-foot sky-high delight in your backyard because of a swing set disagreement?" "It's about aesthetic dissonance," I said deadpan. Dale stared at me for a moment, then let out a laugh that was more of a bark. It was a glorious, unrestrained sound that made the waitress jump. "Son, you're my kind of crazy. I'm in." For the next hour, we hunched over my printouts of the HOA bylaws, Dale's greasy fingerprints marking up the pages like a sacred text. He cackled with glee at every loophole I pointed out. "Vehicular asset. Oh, that's beautiful, kid. That's poetry," he wheezed, slapping the table. We planned our attack. The concrete footings for the swing set were a problem. The Ferris wheel needed its own, much larger anchor pads. "We won't call them foundations," Dale schemed, a twinkle in his eye. "We'll call them temporary load-bearing transport stabilization platforms. They ain't permanent if they're for the vehicle." We talked power requirements. "Gonna need to run a dedicated 220 line that'll make your toaster jealous," he said. "We'll file the permit with the city as an oversized appliance hookup." And the delivery. "Now, this is the fun part," he said, leaning in conspiratorially. "The main trailer is a wide load, needs a permit and a police escort to get through town. Your neighbors are gonna love that." We shook on it. His price was eye-watering, but the look I imagined on Brenda McCluskey's face was priceless. As I left the diner, I felt a giddy sense of triumph. I hadn't just hired a contractor. I'd found a co-conspirator, an artist of anarchy. Operation Carousel of Chaos was officially a go. A week later, the quiet, manicured tranquility of Maple Creek Estates was shattered. It started with a sound. A low, grinding groan of a diesel engine in a gear far too low for our peaceful streets. Then came the flashing yellow lights. A massive flatbed truck, the kind that usually carries tanks or small houses, was attempting to navigate our prim little cul-de-sac, guided by two pickup trucks with wide load banners flapping from their roofs. Windows slid open, doors creaked. People emerged onto their perfectly green lawns, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. And 3 doors down, Brenda McCluskey stepped onto her porch, a delicate porcelain coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. Her eyes widened, her jaw went slack. The look on her face was a masterpiece, a symphony of disbelief and horror. I wished I could have it framed. The truck hissed to a stop in front of my house, taking up the entire street. On its bed, shackled with enormous chains, lay the heart of a Ferris wheel, its steel beams painted a faded but defiant red and white. The next 3 days were a blur of glorious, beautiful chaos. A crane, taller than any house on the block, arrived on day 1, its arm reaching into the sky like a mechanical god. It began lifting enormous steel beams over my roof and lowering them into the backyard, where Dale and his 2-man crew, who looked like they'd lost a fight with a lawnmower, guided them into place. The sounds were magnificent. The clang of steel on steel, the whine of power tools, the roar of the crane's engine. And above it all, Scrappy Dale yelling instructions through a cheap megaphone. "A little to the left! No, my left! Are you deaf?" The neighborhood was in an uproar. A small crowd of onlookers had formed a permanent picket line on the sidewalk opposite my house, their phones out, recording the madness. My next-door neighbor, Bob, a quiet man who had once been fined by Brenda for owning a garden gnome she deemed excessively whimsical, gave me a thumbs up over the fence, a tear of joy in his eye. On the afternoon of the second day, Brenda marched across my lawn, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield she was about to lose. Dale and I intercepted her near the azalea bushes. "What?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is the meaning of this?" I gave her my most serene, untroubled smile. "Brenda, good morning. Just doing a little backyard improvement. Hope the noise isn't a bother." "This is a flagrant, egregious violation of at least a dozen bylaws," she hissed. "I don't think so," I said calmly. "Per Bylaw 12, Section 2, this is a temporary vehicular asset." See? I pointed to the massive trailer frame on which the wheel was being constructed. It has axles. We're just parking it here for a bit. Dale, wiping grease from his hands onto his already filthy jeans, chimed in. And per County Code 4.5 subsection 9, any structure under 60 feet doesn't require a commercial zoning variance. This little lady tops out at a neat 55. We're 5 feet clear of being a problem, ma'am. Brenda's face went through an impressive spectrum of colors, from pale white to blotchy red to a deep, alarming purple. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since I'd met her, Brenda McCluskey was speechless. She spun on her heel and retreated back to her beige sanctuary, the war having officially and spectacularly begun. With the final gondola bolted into place and the last string of lights clipped on, the Ferris wheel stood complete. It was magnificent. A 55-foot monument to spite, towering over my one-story ranch house, its faded red and white paint a glorious insult to the neighborhood's carefully curated palette of earth tones. It was rusted in places, it creaked when the wind blew, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My kids just stood in the backyard, staring up at it with a kind of holy reverence. The swing set was forgotten, a distant memory of a simpler time. This was a whole new level of backyard entertainment. Of course, a 55-foot Ferris wheel in the middle of a suburban cul-de-sac does not go unnoticed. It was only a matter of time before the law came knocking. The call, I later learned, came from Brenda, who told the 911 dispatcher that I was operating an illegal and dangerously unregulated carnival in my backyard. 2 days after construction finished, a police cruiser pulled up quietly to the curb. 2 officers got out. One was a young, fresh-faced rookie who looked like he'd just graduated from the academy yesterday. His name tag read Ramirez. The other was older, with a weary, seen-it-all look in his eyes, and a mustache that had probably been in service since the 1980s. His tag read Dave. I met them at the door, trying to project an aura of calm, law-abiding citizenship. "Gentlemen," I said with a nod, "can I help you?" Officer Dave sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 ridiculous domestic disputes. "Sir, we got a call about, well, the caller said an illegal carnival in your backyard." He craned his neck to peer over my shoulder, and his eyes widened slightly as he saw the top of the Ferris wheel peeking over my roof. "Ah, that," I said. "Officer, it's a single, privately owned, vertical looping recreational device, strictly for family use. Would you like to see it?" I led them through the house and into the backyard. They stopped dead on the patio, staring up. Officer Ramirez's jaw was practically on the ground. Officer Dave just slowly shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "In 25 years on the force, that's a new one." "We've received a complaint that this is an unpermitted structure," Ramirez said, trying to sound official while clearly fighting the urge to take a picture with his phone. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I disappeared back into the house and returned with a neatly organized 3-ring binder, its cover labeled Project Freedom Ride. "Gentlemen," I said, opening the binder on the patio table. "Here you'll find the municipal permit for the 220-volt electrical installation, filed as an oversized appliance hookup. Here is the vehicle registration for the trailer frame the device is constructed upon, classifying it as a vehicular asset. And just for your reference, I've included a copy of the Maple Creek Estates HOA bylaws, with the relevant passages highlighted." Officer Dave picked up the binder, flipping through the pages. He looked at the permits, at the registration, at the highlighted bylaws. He looked at me. He looked back at the Ferris wheel. Then he looked at Ramirez, who was trying very hard to pretend he wasn't impressed. "Everything appears to be in order," Dave said. his voice a flat monotone that barely concealed his amusement. Technically. So, we're good? I asked. As far as the law is concerned, you haven't broken any, he said, handing the binder back. Your neighbors, on the other hand. That's a different story. He tipped his hat. Good luck, sir. Ramirez finally broke his professional silence. Dispatch, he said into his shoulder radio, turning away from me but not quite managing to hide his smirk. Responding to the disturbance call on Maple Lane, the structure appears to be technically compliant. Situation is stable. I watched them walk away, two public servants who had just witnessed the zenith of suburban absurdity. From her window across the street, I could see Brenda's silhouette, her posture radiating pure, impotent fury. The law was on my side. For now. The Ferris wheel didn't just change my backyard. It fractured the entire neighborhood. Maple Creek Estates, once a quiet sea of beige conformity, was now a hotbed of civil war. You were either Team Jack or Team Brenda. There was no middle ground. Team Brenda consisted of the HOA true believers, the ones who genuinely thought a non-taupe garden shed could trigger the apocalypse. Their weapon of choice was the Neighborhood Next Door app. The posts were glorious. To the resident on Maple Lane with the structure, one post began. The constant metallic creaking is deeply unsettling and is affecting my Pomeranian's meditation schedule. This is not the peaceful environment I was promised. Another read, does anyone know if the glare from the carnival lights is a violation of light pollution ordinances? My begonias are very sensitive. But for every complaint, a supporter rose to my defense. Team Jack was a motley crew of rebels, a silent majority of residents who had long suffered under Brenda's iron-fisted rule. My next-door neighbor, Bob, became my de facto second-in-command. The night after the cops came, he shuffled over with a 6-pack of beer. He stared up at the Ferris wheel, his eyes wide with wonder. "You did it, you magnificent bastard," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He told me about his infamous gnome incident, how Brenda had sent him a violation notice with photographic evidence and a demand that he remove the whimsical effigy from public view. "I've been dreaming of a day like this," he said, handing me a beer. "You're doing the Lord's work, son." The neighborhood kids were, of course, my most fervent disciples. They started showing up at my fence, their eyes pleading. "Can we have a ride, Mr. Henderson, please?" That Saturday, I decided it was time. After running a dozen safety checks, I fired up the generator. The old motor sputtered to life with a satisfying roar, and the strings of lights flickered on, bathing the backyard in a warm, festive glow. The wheel began to turn, its slow, rhythmic creak now the official anthem of my rebellion. Sarah, Lily, Tom, and I climbed into the first gondola. As we rose above the house, the world expanded. We could see the whole neighborhood, the neat rows of identical houses, the little squares of perfect green lawn. We could see Bob on his deck, raising his beer in a toast. And we could see Brenda's house, the only one on the block with all its curtains drawn, a fortress of spite in a sea of suburban lights. "You're a menace, you know that?" Sarah said, but she was smiling, her head resting on my shoulder. Lily and Tom weren't listening. Their faces were pressed against the side of the car, their eyes filled with pure, unadulterated joy. From 55 feet up, the world looked different. The problems seemed smaller. The squeak of the chains was gone, replaced by the gentle, humming groan of a dream I didn't even know I had. It was perfect. Perfection, however, attracts attention. A teenager from the next street over posted a video of my Ferris wheel on TikTok, set to some obnoxious song. By Monday morning, it had 1 million views. By Tuesday, the local news showed up. A reporter named Cynthia, with impossibly white teeth and hair that defied the laws of physics, stood on my front lawn, a cameraman orbiting her. I stepped outside, my heart pounding. This was it. Prime time. "Jack Henderson?" she asked, extending a microphone. "Cynthia Winters, Channel 8 News. We're doing a story on a unique neighborhood dispute. People are calling you the Ferris wheel father. Is it true you installed this because of a disagreement over a swing set?" I knew this was a critical moment. I could be portrayed as a hero or a crackpot. I decided to lean into the absurdity. "That's an oversimplification," I said, looking directly into the camera with my most serious expression. Our HOA has very specific and rigorous guidelines regarding aesthetic harmony. A simple, handcrafted cedar swing set was deemed too disruptive to the delicate visual tapestry of the community. Cynthia blinked. "So, you built a Ferris wheel instead?" "Precisely," I said with a solemn nod. I felt a 5-ton, 55-foot, electrically powered, rotating steel marvel better captured the subtle, understated spirit of suburban life. It's an homage to the bylaws, really. It's not permanent, and it's technically a vehicle. It is, by every measure, the perfect HOA-compliant backyard accessory. The interview was a hit. My deadpan delivery, combined with the sheer ridiculousness of the Ferris wheel spinning majestically in the background, was comedic gold. The story got picked up by national blogs. I was on Good Morning America's website. My inbox was flooded with emails from people all over the country, sharing their own horror stories about tyrannical HOAs and hailing me as their king. I was no longer just Jack Henderson, suburban dad. I was a symbol, a folk hero for the common man, fighting back against petty bureaucracy with the biggest, loudest, most gloriously impractical weapon imaginable. It was terrifying, and it was deeply, deeply satisfying. Brenda had wanted a war over a swing set. I had given her Armageddon with blinking lights and a great view. My 15 minutes of fame brought the kind of attention I had not anticipated. Brenda and the HOA, humiliated on a national stage, decided to escalate. They stopped sending beige envelopes and went straight for the big guns. A courier delivered a package to my door so thick it could have stopped a bullet. Inside was a letter from a law firm, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, or something equally ominous, printed on paper that felt more like linen than wood pulp. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It used phrases like public nuisance, flagrant disregard for restrictive covenants, and my personal favorite, intentional infliction of emotional distress, which was accompanied by a sworn affidavit from Brenda detailing the anxiety and sleepless nights my gaudy, towering contraption had caused her. The letter concluded with a simple demand: cease and desist all operation of the device and have it removed within 72 hours, or they would file a lawsuit seeking damages so high I'd have to sell not only my house, but several of my non-essential organs to pay for it. The folk hero feeling evaporated, replaced by the cold, clammy grip of genuine fear. I showed the letter to Sarah. The color drained from her face. "Okay, Jack, this has stopped being funny," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're going to take our house. We need a lawyer, a real one." My search for legal counsel was as disheartening as my search for a contractor had been. The first 2 lawyers I consulted looked at my binder of evidence, sighed, and advised me to cut my losses and take the Ferris wheel down. They spoke of injunctions and costly litigation. They saw a losing case. I was beginning to lose hope. Then, my ally Bob from next door gave me a crumpled business card. "This guy," he said, "is a different breed. He got my cousin out of a timeshare contract in Florida. The man is an artist." The card was simple: Vinny the Loophole Costello Creative Litigation. His office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a discount mattress store and a nail salon. The man himself was a spectacle. He was short, impeccably dressed in a suit that was just a little too shiny, and he paced his office with the nervous energy of a caged panther. The walls were covered not with law degrees, but with framed, autographed photos of him with various local celebrities, including a weatherman and a former city councilman who'd been indicted for fraud. I laid out my case, ending with the terrifying letter from the HOA's lawyers. Vinny snatched it from my hand, his eyes scanning the page at an incredible speed. He read for a moment, then tossed the letter onto his desk and burst out laughing. This is what has you spooked? He chortled. This is a boilerplate scare tactic. Intentional infliction of emotional distress? Beautiful, I love it. He started pacing, gesticulating wildly. They're coming at you with contract law, Jackie boy. But this isn't about contracts. This is about hearts and minds. This is a PR war, and right now you're General Patton, and she's the sad little man in the bunker. He spun to face me, his eyes gleaming. We don't fight them in court. We fight them in the court of public opinion, the neighborhood. Forget the law. The law's boring. We're going to win them over with pure, unadulterated spectacle. His strategy was legally dubious, morally questionable, and absolutely brilliant. I hired him on the spot. Armed with Vinny's audacious advice, I ignored the 72-hour deadline. In response, Brenda called for an emergency, all-hands-on-deck HOA meeting to be held at the community clubhouse. The agenda: a special vote to authorize the lawsuit against my family and to have the Ferris wheel forcibly removed at my expense. This was it, the final showdown. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. The air was thick with tension and the faint scent of potpourri. The room was physically divided, like a wedding where the families despise each other. On one side sat Brenda and her loyalists, a grim-faced tribunal of beige-clad warriors. On the other sat my supporters, Bob and his wife, the young couple from down the street who thought the whole thing was hilarious, and a surprising number of other residents who were clearly tired of living under Brenda's thumb. Brenda stood at a podium at the front of the room, looking severe and presidential. She began her case with a PowerPoint presentation. The first slide was a picture of my Ferris wheel, taken from an unflattering angle that emphasized a patch of rust. The slides that followed were a masterwork of fear-mongering, charts showing projected property value declines, quotes from anonymous neighbors about the incessant noise, and a blurry photo of a raccoon near my fence, which she presented as evidence that my carnival attraction was drawing vermin. She spoke of rules, of order, of the sacred covenant they had all entered into when they bought their homes in Maple Creek Estates. She was dry, factual, and utterly devoid of humanity. She concluded by formally motioning for the vote. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the podium, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked out at the faces in the crowd, some hostile, some friendly, most just looking worried. I took a deep breath and threw away the speech Vinny and I had prepared. I'm not going to talk about bylaws, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. Brenda's right. I broke the rules. I bought a swing set for my kids without filling out the proper paperwork. And when I was told to remove it, I responded, disproportionately. A few chuckles rippled through my side of the room. I could stand here and argue about the definition of permanent versus temporary, or whether a Ferris wheel is a structure or a vehicle. But that's not the real issue, is it? The real issue is that we're a neighborhood. We're people living side by side, and rules should be there to help us do that, not to turn us against each other over the color of a swing set. I looked directly at Brenda. I moved here for the same reason most of you did, for a safe, quiet place to raise my family. A place where my kids could play in the backyard. The Ferris wheel, that was ridiculous. I'll admit it. It was an act of frustration, but Something amazing happened. In the past 2 weeks, because of that ridiculous thing in my yard, I've talked to more of my neighbors than I have in the 5 years I've lived here. Bob brought me a beer. The kids on the block learned each other's names. We became more of a community, not less. I paused, letting the words sink in. So here's my offer. Forget the lawyers. Let's be neighbors. I'll abide by whatever rules you want to set for the Ferris wheel, operating hours, noise levels, you name it. But before you vote on whether to sue me, I want to invite all of you to my house tomorrow for a neighborhood unity BBQ. The price of admission is 1 vote, and everyone on both sides of the aisle gets a free ride. A murmur went through the room. Brenda looked like she had just swallowed a wasp. Before she could object, Bob stood up and started clapping. Then another person joined in, and another. Soon, my entire half of the room was applauding. The motion to sue was tabled, the war was over, and I had a lot of burgers to buy. The next evening, my backyard was transformed. The grill was smoking, a cooler was overflowing with drinks, and the Ferris wheel was lit up against the twilight sky, turning slowly and majestically. And the yard was filled with people, neighbors. Most of them had come, drawn by a mix of curiosity and a desire for a free meal. Even a few of Brenda's former allies were there, looking sheepish as their kids ran, laughing towards the line for the ride. Bob came over and slapped me on the back, a huge grin on his face. "The unofficial vote is in," he said, handing me a beer. "We're forming a committee to review and rewrite some of the HOA's most ridiculous bylaws. The aesthetic dissonance clause is first on the chopping block. Brenda, of course, was not there. Her house remained dark and silent, a lone island of defiance. But as I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, I realized it didn't matter. Later that night, when the last guest had gone home, I took my family for one final ride. As our gondola reached the very top, we looked down at the quiet street, at the houses with their lights glowing, at the community we had accidentally, absurdly, brought a little bit closer together. The rhythmic, gentle hum of the Ferris wheel was the only sound. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're an absolute idiot," she whispered. "I know," I said, smiling as I looked down at our little kingdom. "But see? Aesthetic harmony." She just rolled her eyes, a perfect smile on her face, and enjoyed the view.